right, welcome back. We're live again. Today talking about expiration dates, use by, sell by. What do these things mean? And is it safe to eat things after those dates pass? So for the most part, expiration dates tell us a lot more about quality than they tell us about safety. As I said, there are a few different kind of dates that we see on food products, so we're going to go through those a little bit. If you have any questions as I go along, you're welcome to throw them in the chat, and we'll answer them at the end. So sell-by dates. Foods like dairy products, typically milk is one we think of very often, have sell-by dates. So this indicates to the store how long a food can be available to the consumer to purchase. As the sale-by date gets closer, some stores will discount the item to get rid of it, get it out of stock, and then once the sell-by date arrives, stores will pull that item from the shelves. So is it still safe to eat food or drink milk, in this case, after the sell-by date passes? The answer is yes. So that sell-by date allows for a window of time to continue consuming that food after the sell-by date passes. So for example, this carton of milk that I have, its sell-by date is May 12th. So even if I waited until May 11th to purchase this carton of milk, they build in an extra buffer of about a week that I would still be able to drink this milk and it would be fine quality-wise. So it wouldn't be good if stores had sell-by dates and the sell-by date was like the last day that the quality was good, because people might buy it, take it home, and before they even have a chance to use the milk, it's gone bad. So they take that into account when manufacturers put dates on food items. And backing up a little bit, food dating in the United States, and that's dates on cartons, not dating other people, right? So food dating in the US is kind of, it depends. It's a lot subjective to the manufacturer. There's no kind of overarching procedure that people follow for food dating, which is why it is so confusing sometimes as to what these different terms mean. So they're put on by manufacturers, and oftentimes it's communication to the retailer and the manufacturer as much as it is communication to the consumer. Okay, so that's a sell-by date. A best-by date is typically on items that have a long shelf life. So things like peanut butter, canned food, a lot of items from the middle of the grocery store will have best-by dates. So this means you can keep the item for quite a long time, right? So it's got a long shelf life. It'll stay in your pantry for quite a long time. Eventually, though, the quality of that food item is going to start going down. So, the peanut butter might taste a little off, or, crackers might get stale, something like that. So the quality, not the safety, begins to be impacted first. So that best-by date just tells you this is the last day, as best we can determine. This is the last day, or this is the month where the quality will, the peak quality is as good as it was when we canned it, or the day that you bought it, starts to go down. It's not really about safety at all. So Best Buy is most driven by quality. Let me think if there's anything else I want to tell you about Best Buy. So again, eating foods after the Best Buy date is usually safe, but you may notice changes in flavor, texture, or smell. So, marks of quality. If you open an item that's really way past its best by date, and you notice off smells, or you notice that the seal itself is broken or no longer intact, do dispose of that food. It might not make you sick, but certainly with broken seals, we don't want to take any chances. Okay. Use by dates, so we best by and then use by are kind of similar. Sometimes they're used interchangeably. Sometimes they're a mashup. Sometimes the products will say, in this case, we have, you can kind of see, best if used by. So we're combining the two. But used by typically means it's a product that has a shorter shelf life than something that has a best by date. So it's marking the point where the food should be consumed before quality is affected again, but the quality is going to rapidly decline after that use by date. A good example is this salad mix. So this salad spring mix has a use by date of May 12th. Now I could use the salad after the use by date, but I'll notice, changes to the quality of the lettuce, and it's the kind of thing where we do get into the realm of safety. So produce items, poultry, meat, eggs, be aware if it has a use by date. To follow that a bit more closely than you would follow a best by date. And when in doubt, remember that when in doubt, throw it out. You also, here's what's interesting about microorganisms that live in our food. Spoilage organisms like milk that spoils and then smells sour. We can usually smell, taste, sometimes even see spoilage organisms in the case of like funguses and molds. But with pathogenic bacteria or, viruses or parasites, all kinds of awful, nefarious things, with pathogenic organisms, we can't see, taste, smell. So when in doubt, toss it, and that's okay. Packing dates. Now, in particular, on things like canned food, you might see a string of numbers and letters that you're like, what in the world is this? I don't know if I'm supposed to understand what that means. Typically, that's a packing date or some kind of indicator to the retailer or to the manufacturer itself of if we had to pull this canned item off the shelf, if we had to pull these kidney beans off the shelf, we would need to know when it was packed, where it was packed, kind of some details about the canned food. So it helps with potential recalls. It's kind of a safety measure. It has everything to do with stores and retailers and really nothing to do with the consumer. So that's a pack date. So for canned food specifically though, if there is a best by date listed, do try to use canned food by that time. Canned food typically is of optimal quality for 2-ish years, could be even a little bit longer. So on this can in particular, it was probably right at 2 years because this one expires, it's best by January of 2021. So, try to use the foods by that point, but the safety of canned food is pretty much like probably one of the safest things in our food supply. It's a really intense process because of the things that can go wrong with canned food. So canned food is really quite safe. Not to say that if you find a piece of like canned food from 2004 in your cabinet as you're digging back through and pulling all of your pantry items out to use during stay-at-home measures. If it's from 2004, maybe go ahead and toss it. If it's from 2018 or it says Best Buy, it's probably okay. The quality might be affected. You might notice it's a little bit different in terms of texture, taste, quality. but safety-wise, it's fine. It's fine. Okay. Though, if you notice you've got some canned food that has dents, really significant dents, bulges, or it's really rusty, do throw that canned food away because it's possible that it messes with the seal. You can get, microorganisms, pathogens down in there in the canned food, and that's when things get really quite unsafe. So be aware of that. Do throw away any canned food that has those dents, bulges, or is super rusty. There are some dates that we really do want to abide by when it comes to expiration. So things like vitamins, baby formula, over-the-counter medicines. These items enter the body and may work differently if they're consumed after the expiration date passes. So do dispose of those items safely after the expiration date has passed. A lot of those items will say do not consume after X date. Some of them just say expires. So I have some vitamin C actually that is expired in 2018. I do need to get rid of it. I haven't, taken it, so it's okay. But if you have vitamins, over-the-counter medicines, or if you have, an infant in your life and there's baby formula around, pay attention to those expiration dates. Other items that will have a, more firm expiration date are baking mixes and yeast. So leavening agents, whether those are chemical leavening agents or natural, like yeast, to help a cake or bread or whatever rise. So those rising agents will start to lose their effectiveness over time. You can use yeast that is expired, especially right now if you're desperate, you just really want to bake some bread and all you have is the yeast in your cabinet. That's okay, or the yeast in your refrigerator. That's okay. Just know that it might not work quite as well. So some other factors that are going to impact how long you can keep food with optimum quality and safety in mind. Once you open a container of something, it needs to be refrigerated if it's an item that needs to be refrigerated. So something like milk, obviously, it needs to go in the refrigerator, comes from the refrigerator. Other items like condiments and things, once we open them, and usually it'll say on the label, refrigerate after opening, do pay attention to that and refrigerate that item. It will increase the shelf life, it'll keep it safe, it'll keep spoilage organisms and other organisms that we really don't want growing in our food from starting to grow so quickly. Okay, what else? Once you open something, you really need to use it within the next 3 to 4 days, usually. So we say leftovers, 3 to 4 days. If it's something with a little bit more like a high acid food, about a week. I've put a link in the chat if you're thinking, oh my God, I've got pickles in there, and they've been in there for a month or two. Condiments, jams, jellies, pickles, even things like yogurt, you can keep past that week mark. Nebraska Extension has an excellent resource that I've put in the chat that kind of gives you a breakdown of how to store different items and how long you can store them once they're open. So do check that out if you're interested. But basically, once I open this milk, which it's almost out, I need to go get some more. Once I open this milk, the date printed on the package is a moot point. The date is really just for the store to tell me, you got about a week after this date ends to open and use the milk. But once you open a food package, it starts to break down. So kind of ignore those dates if it's already in your fridge. Be aware of when you open something. Maybe even add a new date to it. Grab a Sharpie and tape it to your fridge and have, that new date that you open something. printed on the package. If you find yourself constantly throwing stuff away, like, I swear I just bought this thing and here it is already spoiled, then start, keeping track of when it was you opened something, because it could be that you're going by the date on the package when in reality, what matters is when you open that item. Okay. So that's true of really anything you cook as well. If you find yourself constantly throwing away food, put your own expiration date on food that you have cooked, labeling the container. And do place that container or food that you're working on consuming at the front of your fridge or maybe at the top. I have a rule where leftovers live at the top of my fridge so that I can see very easily what needs to be eaten so I don't throw away excess food. And just try to remember what comes in first needs to also go out first. So it's not like a case of, I put this food in here, I lost it at the back of my fridge, I went and bought another one, and then I cleaned out my fridge a couple months later and found cottage cheese and the milk, which would be really gross, right? Okay. So again, for condiments, jams, dressings, things like that, you do have longer, usually a couple months. It does depend on the product. So that link, that Nebraska extension link, is a great resource to help you know when exactly or how much time you have with certain items. Yeah. If you're trying to convince a family member, no, that ketchup is gross and old and we need to throw it away, you can use this evidence-based resource to back you up, okay? And then also how long you keep these items open in the fridge, whether it's something you bought or something you prepared at home, it's going to depend on the temperature of that storage. So you can see it might be mirrored in the video, so I apologize for that, but hopefully you can read that this says less than 0 degrees Fahrenheit for the freezer and less than 40 degrees Fahrenheit equal to or less than 0 and 40 degrees for cold storage, okay? So 40 degrees for the refrigerator, 0 degrees for the freezer, ideally a little less, so somewhere in that like 38, 39, -2, -1, so you have a little bit of leeway room. And you can buy thermometers for your fridge and freezer. They're really quite cheap, and monitor it that way. You can also set the temperature setting in your refrigerator, in your freezer, to just below what is recommended. So it's colder, slightly colder than what is recommended. Most home refrigerators and freezers, refrigerators in particular, are way too warm. It kind of, the average hovers somewhere around, 45 to 50 degrees, which is way higher than that recommended amount. So you can keep your food for longer. You can keep it closer to that week mark if you know that your refrigerated storage is staying this cold. Okay, so that's pretty much it for today. I'll give you all a few minutes if you want to ask a question about food labels. I know it's not a super riveting subject, but it is important. And anytime that we can save money by not throwing out food that we have bought already is a good day. So I don't know that anybody has any questions. That's all right. Do in the chat or in the comments if you're watching afterwards, let me know if you have suggestions for future videos, any topic that you'd like to see covered, or questions that you have about food or nutrition or even home food preservation, what it is you're interested in learning more about. I'm not sure what our video will be next week, but I'm sure it'll be something fun. So join me next Thursday at 4 p.m. for another episode of Alamance Extension Eats. And I'll see you then.